soybean production, we need to know when we reach the different stages of growth. We've talked a little bit about vegetative stages, but really when the soybeans are most important are when we reach the reproductive stages. And we define R1 as a reproductive stage when the flowers start to develop anywhere on the main stem. If we look at the plant here, we'll see that it's reached R1 is when we find a flower anywhere on the main stem, which is the first reproductive stage in soybean production. These soybeans are approaching or reaching what we call R2, which is full bloom, where we have flowers developing at one of the two uppermost nodes of fully expanded leaves. So we can see these plants are flowering up and down the plant where we've reached full flower. R2, the second reproductive stage. R3 is a reproductive stage where we have 5mm pods. That's about 3/16 of an inch, anywhere on the top 4 nodes. As you can see, the pods have started to develop. This growth stage is very important. Typically, this is when we make our first fungicide application to control early season diseases. R4 is where we have a 2-centimeter pod, which is about 3/4 of an inch. When we find a 3/4 of an inch pod on one of the top 4 uppermost nodes, this is typically when we start to see the pods start to elongate. This is R4. Again, 2 centimeters, about 3/4 of an inch pod, anywhere on the top 4 nodes. R5 is where we have a 3mm seed within the pod, anywhere at the top 4 nodes. Again, that's a 3mm seed within the pod. So we'll have to open up this pod and look, and we'll find some small, about 1/4 of an inch seed within the pod. R5 is where we have 3mm seed within the pod at any one of the top 4 nodes. This is 3mm, about 1/4 of an inch. So you can see the small seed starting to develop in the pod. At R5, about 3mm seed, we start to see stink bugs moving in the fields to feed on the small developing seed. R6 is when the seed have filled the pod cavity. As we can see, these seeds are just about touching each other, and they've pretty well reached their full dry weight potential. As you can see, the membrane is still attached, so these seeds are still continuing to grow, although they're about as large as they're going to get before they start to dry down and go into maturity. When we talk about growth stages within a field, we need to remember when it reaches that stage, we're talking when the average of the field reaches that stage, not when one individual plant reaches that stage. You may have one flower in the field, but that doesn't mean that you're at R1. When the average of the field has one flower, then you would be at that growth stage or R1. So we need to remember that we need to look throughout the field to make sure that that is the average of the field at that growth stage. Growth stages are very important in our soybean production. We need to know what growth stages we're in so we can make management decisions. A lot of times we apply fungicides or insecticides at certain growth stages. Also, a lot of the practices that we do are done at specific growth stages to where we get the most economic benefit from those applications. So again, soybean production has a lot of different growth stages that I think are very important that you learn when you're at those growth stages to make sure that you're applying the pesticides at the proper timing.